Hi, this is Jen Rubin, editor-in-chief of The Contrarian. We have back with us our dear friend Neera Tanden, who is the head of CAP, the Center for American Progress. Welcome.
Great to be with you.
Well, it was a not great day yesterday. Um, how do you describe for our viewers what the Senate bill essentially does?
I think in a nutshell, the bill essentially raises costs on working families through taking away their health care, making health care less affordable, making it harder for the poorest Americans to access food, so more people will go hungry, kill jobs in renewable energy, and in order to pay for a tax series of tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans, all while exploding the debt. That is the essential decision that Republicans made. And I do think it's important that we had a bipartisan vote against the bill. It
Yes.
was not just Democrats leading the charge, but you had people from across the spectrum of Republicans, the far right, sort of the middle, and perhaps people who like to think of themselves as moderate, voting against the legislation. So I think the truth is that we have never seen legislation in my lifetime that is so skewed towards the wealthy. And most importantly, the people who will bear the brunt of this, just like they bear the brunt of the tariffs, are the working class people of this country, the people who are struggling, the people who are struggling to make ends meet, striving to get into the middle class. They are going to pay. And that is the tragedy of this moment.
It absolutely is. And I want to be clear with our audience, because there were 50 Republicans who voted for them for this bill, every single one of them was the deciding vote. And that means every single
100%.
one of them should be voted out of office, frankly. I have never seen a bill that was this disastrous. And we heard from Senator Lisa Murkowski afterwards, which was the most pathetic, shameful, I don't even want to call it an explanation, an excuse for voting for it. She hopes it comes back from the House. She really doesn't like it. Well, can we get the Alaska representative then to change the bill so it does come back? What is she talking about?
I mean, I just have to say that there are times in politics where the facts are so bad for you that you just start grasping at the most ridiculous statements. The fact, and this legislation is so terrible that she's not even really the only one. Josh Hawley went to reporters on Saturday describing in detail how this legislation will take healthcare away from working class people and making the argument that if they're going to be the working class party, they should not do things like that, and then saying he's going to vote for the bill. So
Absolutely.
there's there's that statement, and then there's Lisa Murkowski, who I think is really a kind of tragic and sadly pathetic person or figure in this debate. It is, I think she's a really serious person, but she has had to decry that seriousness by making statements that are so absurd. She criticizes the bill. And, I think most Americans get if you don't like a bill, there's a way to address that. You can vote no. If you think a bill will hurt Alaskans, as she has articulated. Let's just be clear what happened with Lisa Murkowski. She tried to get a sweetheart carve out of the pain of this bill for her constituents, right? Not for the country, just for Alaskans. And they tried hard to do it. They stopped it. They made several stop attempts and then they failed. They got some carve outs for SNAP, but for healthcare in Alaska, they ultimately failed to get that carve out. She failed to get that carve out. And then she decided to vote for it anyway. It is so let's just be clear. She knows it will hurt her constituents. We know she knows it will hurt her constituents because she tried to get the sweetheart deal. She can't even argue ignorance in the future. She tried hard to get a carve out for her own people. Doesn't matter what the happens to the country, only her state matters. Okay. Then she didn't get it really because the parliamentarian ruled it out of order, so it couldn't be in the bill. And then she ultimately caved and voted no, voted for it. And that is the tragedy of this situation, which is that all of these people have eyes wide open on the harm. And now, like in a completely pathetic way, a lot of Republican senators are like in blind quotes arguing about how scared they are about this legislation,
Mm.
how they're worried about it, as if they had no agency to just say no. And that's what's
Exactly.
outrageous.
Exactly. And I would remind people, Lisa Murkowski is not on the ballot in 2026, but Dan Sullivan is. And he is just as responsible for this as anyone. He voted for this. He knew he couldn't spare Alaskans because Lisa Murkowski was arguing on his behalf too, and he voted for it anyway.
Well, let me say a word about this because I don't think people know this, but often Lisa Murkowski will be the battering ram for Dan Sullivan. And Dan Sullivan, who's very, very conservative, you know, really became outraged when Democrats were basically arguing to the parliamentarian to take out this, like, basically polar payback. Um, and and so he knew again, he knows that this will hurt his constituents. And this is the tragedy of the Trump era, which is that you have this character demonstration every day. These people know Trump is asking them to vote for legislation that will hurt their constituents, people who vote for them, in most of the landmass of this country, people on Medicaid, half of them or more are voting for Donald Trump. Okay. And
Absolutely.
they know that they're hurting their own voters. But they all decide to put their own political careers ahead of what's right for the country. And like a demonstration of all of this is Tom Tillis. He stood by principle and was associated, and now he's not running. And I think this is like the tragedy of right now. But I will say, what everyone should have in mind is that you will lose. You will lose in these moderates in the House who face this vote today. You will lose in the general if you do not lose in your primary because what you are doing is so unpopular and so wrong. It's so cruel. And I think this will be a vote that lives in infamy.
Absolutely. And the bill now, as we speak, at least, goes over to the House. We don't know exactly when the vote will happen. They're having trouble getting their people back. And there's a lot of squawking on the Republican side. Some of this is fake squawking, like Josh Hawley did in the Senate. They complain and then they fall in. Some of it may be real. But people can still do something before that final vote. What can they do, Neera?
It's really, really crucial to call your members of Congress. If you know anyone who's in a district, a kind of red district or a district in blue states that has a Republican leader, a Republican House member, this is the time to make calls. Go online, go on social media. Anything you can do is really important. And, I know that people can feel very disheartened by this vote, but I do want to say, Senator Thune wanted this bill to pass last week. He wanted to pass it really in the dead of night. He wanted to get a deal and then there'd be a very quick votorama and really the American people would have less time to focus on it. Because it took them so long to get to the vote yesterday, it was on the floor for days. This is a moment where we can really educate the public. And again, the more people know about this legislation, the more they hate it. And that is why this process has been so fast and furious, because essentially they would like to hoodwink the American people by passing the legislation before anyone really has a chance to digest it. We are slowing them down. The
Right. And
calls, the actions, it's making people think twice. And the most important thing to say to these quote unquote moderate House members is this: they committed to basically harming Medicaid, but really only at a certain number. And then they all made commitments saying they would never vote for anything more. Then it goes to the Senate, and amazingly, they figured out ways to be even more cruel. So we're now at over $1 trillion in cuts to Medicaid, which will translate into millions upon millions of people losing health care coverage. And They made commitments that they would not vote for this, and they are breaking their word if they do. And we will remember that, the fact that they broke their word to the American people. And that is what has to like be in their heads as they approach this vote, which is voters will not forgive these lies. And Trump may overwhelm them. I get that, but then they should know they will not be returning in 2026. Maybe it takes them a few months longer. They have to wait till the general instead of their primary, but they will be defeated one way or the other.
Absolutely. And I have to say that a great deal of that delay, the credit goes to the Senate Democrats, who I know people have not always been pleased with, but they fought tooth and nail. They knocked out many of these beyond believable provisions. They were the ones who were able to knock out the polar payoff. They
Yes.
went to the parliamentarian. The parliamentarian doesn't operate on her own, although she makes decisions. The Senate Democrats fought tooth and nail. The House Democrats do not have the variety of tools available to them. And we know, as the hopefully one day speaker, soon to be speaker, Hakeem Jeffries said that they're going to all vote hell no. But we hope they prevail on some of their compatriots. We spoke to Richie Torres yesterday. There are a bunch of upstate Republicans who think that they're going to get reelected in 2026. Not if they vote for this thing. There are California Republicans who are sitting in House seats that Kamala Harris won, that Joe Biden won. They're not going to get reelected. So they have a choice. They can do the right thing and have a chance to be reelected. They can do the wrong thing and be thrown out of office. So it seems like a pretty basic choice. And we're going to find out in the next 24, 36 hours what's going on. Thank you, Neera. Thank you for everything CAP is doing. Folks, all those statistics we keep bringing you, all the detail that comes primarily from CAP and her phenomenal staff, which has been in the weeds on this from the get-go. So thank you, Neera.
It's a great coalition effort, and when a lot of reporters weren't focused on what this legislation would do, when the mainstream media was covering Greenland instead of the actual harm to the American people, I just want to say a heartfelt thank you to the contrarian who has been tracking the story and through the House committees, through House passage, through the Senate. It's not like you guys have just woke up on Sunday and realized this bill is about to pass. You've been tracking it all the way through. So I want to say a heartfelt thank to you as well. Thank you to you as well.
Very good. We'll see you soon, Neera. Let's hope the House stays strong. We'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.